My son screamed at me that I didn't even deserve a roof over my head. And that night, I received the $5.9 million payment for my building in Manhattan. I never thought a child's words could hurt more than 20 years of loneliness. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell anyone. And if, for just a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me to keep unburdening myself. It was 9:30 on the night of October 15th when I heard those words come out of my son Ethan's mouth, right in the middle of his wedding toast. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was filled with elegant guests, the golden lights creating that perfect ambiance that Jessica, his brand new wife, had planned for months. I was wearing my navy blue dress, the only decent one I owned, and I'd had my hair done at Mrs. Carmen's little salon in Astoria, spending the last $50 I had in my wallet. I was sitting at table 12, the one furthest from the head table, next to some distant cousins who barely knew Ethan. My glass of champagne remained untouched on the white tablecloth as I watched my son, now 32, rise gracefully before the 200 guests. His pearl gray suit fit him perfectly. I had paid for it myself 3 months earlier, emptying my savings account. And his Italian silk tie shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. "I want to raise a glass to the most important woman in my life," Ethan began, taking Jessica's hand tenderly. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, just for a second, I thought he meant me. That after so many years of silence and contempt, my son would finally acknowledge me in front of all these elegant people who had been looking down their noses at me all evening. But then his eyes locked onto mine, cold, as hard as the marble on the ballroom floor. "Jessica has taught me that some people only serve to hold you back, to drag down your dreams," he continued, his voice rising as a few guests started to glance toward my table. "So, Mom, I want to tell you something I've been holding in for a long time." The silence grew as thick as a winter fog over the Hudson. I could feel every eye in the room land on me, feel the whispers spreading between tables like an invisible virus. "You don't deserve a roof over your head or respect or anything. You're a burden. This is my life now, and there's no room for you in it." The words fell on me like stones. Each syllable was a direct blow to my chest, to the place where my mother's heart once lived. The guests froze for a moment, until a few started to laugh nervously, thinking it was part of some elaborate joke, but I knew it wasn't. I'd known that look in Ethan's eyes since he was a little boy, the same one he'd have when he broke something and blamed his sister, Chloe. Jessica clapped enthusiastically, her perfect smile flashing under the lights like the diamonds in her necklace, the same one I'd seen in the window at Tiffany's, which cost more than I made in 6 months cleaning offices. A few guests followed her lead, caught up in the energy of the moment, not truly understanding what had just happened. I remained frozen in my chair, my hands clutching my worn leather purse, the same one I'd carried to Ethan's first communion, his high school graduation, and now his wedding. My throat tightened as if someone were pulling an invisible rope around my neck. I wanted to stand up, to run out, to disappear into the stream of taxis on Fifth Avenue, but my legs wouldn't respond. The toast continued with Ethan talking about his new family, about the plans he and Jessica had to buy a house in the Hamptons, about the honeymoon to the Maldives that her father, a real estate developer who had never said more than 2 words to me, had gifted them. Every sentence was another stab, a reminder that I was no longer part of his dreams, that all my sacrifices had been for nothing. I remembered those winter nights in our small apartment in Jackson Heights, when Ethan was 8, and would wake up crying because he was hungry. I'd get up silently, warm up milk on the old stove that barely worked, and fix him graham crackers soaked in milk with a sprinkle of sugar. The only sweet thing we could afford. He would curl up in my arms while I told him made-up stories about brave princes who always saved their mothers from evil dragons. "When I grow up, Mommy, I'm going to buy you a big house with a yard," he'd tell me, his honey-colored eyes shining in the dim light of the living room. "And we'll get a dog named Captain." Where did that little boy go? When did my fairy tales about princes turn into nightmares where I was the dragon? As Ethan finished his speech to a round of applause and cheers, my mind drifted to the envelope I'd been carrying in my purse for 3 weeks. Inside was the document that would change everything, the answer to years of humiliation and scorn. The sale of the brownstone on the Upper East Side, my brownstone, inherited from my father and kept secret all these years, had been finalized that very morning. $900,000. A figure I had never even imagined in my wildest dreams. The result of the neighborhood's skyrocketing property values and the renovations I had slowly paid for with my life savings. But that night, as my son publicly disowned me, the money tasted like ash in my mouth, because I had learned something terrible. You can have all the millions in the world, but if your heart is broken, none of it matters. The music started to play, La Vie en Rose by Edith Piaf, the same song I used to sing to Ethan when he scraped his knee at the park, and couples made their way to the dance floor. I was left alone at my table, watching my son twirl with Jessica amid the golden lights, oblivious to the damage he had just inflicted. The waiter approached to clear my untouched glass. "Did you not care for the champagne, ma'am?" "No," I whispered. "I think I've lost my taste for celebrations." The months leading up to that wedding had been a silent torture. Ever since Ethan had moved in with Jessica into the penthouse of my Upper East Side brownstone, without paying a cent in rent, of course, things had changed drastically. I still lived on the second floor, in the same apartment where I had raised my two children after their father's cowardly departure, but now I felt like an intruder in my own property. Jessica had swept into our lives like an elegant hurricane. The daughter of Richard Davenport, the developer who built half of Westchester, she wore her wealth in every gesture, in every disdainful look she gave me when we crossed paths in the elevator. Her French perfume, Chanel No. 5 I later learned, seeped into every corner of the building, a constant reminder that I smelled of dawn and bleach, the only scents my hands knew after decades of scrubbing other people's floors. "Teresa," she would say with that cold smile that never reached her green eyes, "would it be possible for you to cook at more discreet hours?" The smell of onions drifts up to our floor, and Ethan finds it unpleasant. Unpleasant. The onions I patiently sautéed to make the frittata he used to love as a child, when he'd sit on the kitchen stool and help me beat the eggs with his chubby little hands. The same onions that had stretched our stews during the lean years, when his father left us with a mortgage to pay and two mouths to feed. But I would just nod, as always, because I had learned that contradicting Jessica meant Ethan wouldn't speak to me for days. And a son's silence hurts more than 1,000 slaps. Sundays had become my personal ordeal. They would host gatherings on the communal rooftop terrace, the one I had renovated 5 years ago with my early retirement money, and invite their MBA buddies, young, successful people who talked about investments and travel, while I served the pigs in a blanket I had spent the morning preparing. "Teresa, could you turn your TV down a bit?" Ethan would shout from upstairs. "We're trying to have a civilized conversation up here." A civilized conversation. While I was watching my 8 o'clock Hallmark movie, the only company I had after a full day of speaking to no one, they were discussing hedge funds and condos in Miami. I would lower the volume until I could barely hear, once again resigned to my life shrinking so that my sons could expand. One April evening, as I was climbing the stairs loaded with groceries, Ethan had sold his car and now used mine without asking if I needed it. I heard their voices through the slightly ajar penthouse door. "This situation can't go on, honey," Jessica was saying in that silky voice she used when she wanted to convince my son of something. "Sooner or later, your mother is going to have to go. I'm not going to raise my children with her hovering around the house like a ghost." The bags wobbled in my hands. The on-sale yogurt squished against the carton of skim milk, the only kind I could afford, as I waited for Ethan's reply. The silence stretched for so long I thought my heart had stopped. "You're right," my son finally mumbled. "After the wedding, we'll talk to her. It's time she found a rental apartment somewhere. More appropriate for her age. More appropriate. As if my age were a contagious disease. As if the 63 years I'd spent on this earth, 32 of them dedicated body and soul to raising him, were a mark of shame that needed to be hidden." That night, I cried silently into the pillow that still smelled of the fabric softener I bought at the dollar store, the cheapest I could find, while I remembered all the times I had given up my own dreams for his. When I left my job at Mr. Aurelio's accounting firm to care for him when he had pneumonia, when I sold my mother's jewelry, the only valuable things I owned, to pay for the private tutors that would open doors to his future, When I stayed home every Friday and Saturday of my youth because I couldn't afford a babysitter, and he was too young to be left alone. The months dragged on, and the humiliations became routine. Jessica had decided to redecorate her penthouse with designer furniture that cost more than my entire year's pension. She swept in and out of the building each morning like a queen, laden with bags from Bloomingdale's and Crate and Barrel, while I counted pennies to afford the cheapest chicken at the local market. "Teresa," she said one July morning, intercepting me at the entrance as I returned from shopping, "I need to ask you a favor." Her perfect smile, framed by a mahogany mane she had trimmed every 2 weeks at a salon on Madison Avenue, put me on high alert. Jessica's favors always meant I lost something, time, money, or dignity, without getting anything in return. "We're having a small engagement party this Saturday. Nothing extravagant, just 50 guests. Would it be possible for you to spend the day at a friend's house? It's just that, you understand, the space will be very crowded, and we don't want you to feel uncomfortable in my own home." In the building my father had bought in 1978 by working 12-hour days in construction, the same one I had maintained and improved for over 40 years. "Of course," I replied, in the steadiest voice I could muster. "Don't you worry." But I had no friends to take refuge with. The years of absolute devotion to my children had evaporated my friendships. Chloe, my daughter, had been living in San Francisco for 10 years, married to a tech guy who barely tolerated family visits. My old coworkers had lost track of me when I left the accounting firm, and my neighborhood acquaintances saw me as the lady from the expensive building, someone who had moved up in the world and no longer belonged. So that Saturday, I spent the day wandering through Central Park like a well-dressed homeless person. I sat on dark green benches, watching families stroll by with their children, elderly couples holding hands after 50 years of marriage. I bought a hot dog from a street cart, my only meal of the day, and stayed until the park closed, until the guards politely asked me to leave. When I got home, the building smelled of expensive perfume and French champagne. The aftermath of the party was scattered across the entryway: broken glasses, paper napkins with E&J embossed in gold, rose petals that had been trampled underfoot. I climbed the stairs, avoiding the puddles of champagne that had splashed onto the runner, the same one I'd had installed to make the building look more elegant. The next day, when I went down to get the mail, I found a handwritten note taped to my mailbox. "Teresa, thank you for your understanding yesterday. As a gesture of gratitude, we have decided to cover the cleaning costs for the building. We hope you understand that these events are part of our new life chapter. Sincerely, Jessica." Cleaning costs that I would pay for with my money in my building, after being exiled from my own home so they could celebrate their love at my expense. That night, for the first time in months, I took the document I had signed at the lawyer's office out of an old shoebox. The deed of sale for the building, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. The buyer was an investment fund that had paid my asking price without haggling, knowing that the location in the heart of Manhattan was worth every penny. $900,000, resting in a new bank account that Ethan had no access to. Money he knew nothing about. Money that would change everything, but that I still didn't know if I had the courage to use. Because it's one thing to sign papers in an air-conditioned office, and another thing entirely to find the strength to truly break away from everything you've been for over 60 years of your life. The final straw came a week before the wedding, on what should have been my 64th birthday. That October 8th dawned gray, matching my mood, with the kind of low-hanging clouds typical of a New York autumn that seemed to press down on the city's rooftops. I woke up early, as usual, and made coffee in the Italian press that had belonged to my mother, the only family heirloom I hadn't sold to finance my children's whims. I waited. All morning, I waited for the phone to ring, for the doorbell, for someone to remember that on this day, 64 years ago, I had come into the world in a modest room at Mount Sinai Hospital, when my mother dreamed that her daughter would have a better life than she did. At 12:30, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My heart leaped. Maybe Ethan was coming down with flowers, a cake, one of those smiles he used to give me as a little boy when he drew me birthday cards with his crayons. But the steps continued upward, accompanied by Jessica's crystalline laughter and my son's low murmur as they discussed the reception menu. Through my kitchen window, I could see the penthouse terrace, where they had set up a table with floral catalogs, fabric swatches for centerpieces, and a bottle of Moet and Chandon sparkling in the weak October sun. They were planning their perfect day while I withered in the silence of my forgotten birthday. At 3 in the afternoon, when hunger forced me to open the fridge, I found what would be my birthday present. A note stuck to the door with the logo of a gourmet catering company. Teresa, we will be picking up the items temporarily stored in your refrigerator tomorrow, Tuesday. Please do not consume anything marked with blue labels. They are for the pre-wedding tasting. Thank you for your cooperation. Jessica Davenport. My refrigerator turned into a storage unit for luxuries I would never get to taste. I opened the door and saw it all. Prosciutto, French cheeses that cost more than my weekly groceries, Scottish smoked salmon, Iranian caviar, all marked with blue labels, as if they were poison, as if I were a thief in my own home. For dinner, I had to settle for an expired yogurt I found tucked behind the forbidden delicacies, and an apple that had started to wrinkle in the fruit bowl. 64 years old, celebrated with the leftovers of someone else's happiness. But what truly broke me wasn't the hunger, or being forgotten, or even the appropriation of my refrigerator. It was what I discovered later that night, as I was trying to fall asleep and heard voices from the terrace. Ethan and Jessica had gone out for a smoke. He had picked up the habit again after years, another change since she'd come into his life. "Does your mother know about your grandfather's will?" Jessica asked in the raspy voice she got after her second gin and tonic. "What will?" Ethan replied. And I could picture his confused expression, the furrow that formed between his brows when he didn't understand something. "The one my father showed me yesterday. Richard has been researching properties in the area for his investments. Your maternal grandfather owned more than your mother ever told you." The air caught in my lungs. My father never had a formal will, or so I thought. When he died in 1995, all we found was this building and a checking account with barely $1,000 in it. Chloe and I had split the cash, but the building was left in my name because she was already living in San Francisco and wasn't interested in managing rentals. According to the records, your grandfather owned 2 commercial properties in a building in Soho. He bought them in the 80s, but never left them to your mother in a direct inheritance. Apparently, she never knew. My heart began to pound like a runaway horse. Commercial properties? In Soho? That neighborhood was now the epicenter of chic city life, where commercial rents were astronomical. "Are you sure about that?" Ethan murmured. And for the first time in months, I detected a hint of guilt in his voice. "Completely. My dad says those properties are probably worth between $2 and $3 million right now. They're leased to a chain of Japanese restaurants that pays a fortune monthly. Your mother has been collecting that rent for years without really knowing what it was. She probably thinks it's some kind of government check or something." The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. It was true. For the last 15 years, I had been receiving monthly deposits of $4,200 into my checking account, labeled Real Estate Income, Larea Management. I had always assumed it was part of the rental income from my own building, handled by the management company my father had hired before he died. I never questioned the details because the numbers covered my expenses and allowed me to live without financial stress. But now I understood. My father had left me a fortune I was completely unaware of. "So what are you going to do with that information?" Ethan continued. "Nothing for now, but after the wedding, it might be a good idea for your mother to get some professional financial advice. My father knows people who can help her optimize those assets." Optimize. The word sounded sinister coming from Jessica. I knew that tone, that smooth, seductive way she had with words when she was plotting something. The same voice she'd used to convince Ethan to sell his car and use mine. The same inflection she'd used to suggest I needed my own space away from the building. "Look, honey," Jessica went on, and I heard the clink of ice in her glass. "Your mother is an older woman with no financial literacy. It's almost irresponsible for her to manage that kind of portfolio alone. She could mismanage it, or worse, fall prey to scammers." "You're right," Ethan mumbled after a pause that felt like an eternity. "After the honeymoon, we'll talk to her. It's for her own good, for my own good." The same words his father had used when he explained why he was leaving me for his 20-year younger secretary. It was for my own good that I raised the children alone. For my own good that I didn't ask for alimony. For my own good that I get used to being lonely. I got out of bed, trembling, not from the cold, but from a rage that had been building inside me for decades, like lava in a dormant volcano. I walked barefoot to the kitchen and poured a glass of water from the tap, but my hands were shaking so badly that I spilled half of it on the linoleum floor I had just mopped that morning. In the window's reflection, I saw a 64-year-old woman with disheveled gray hair, wearing a cheap cotton nightgown, crying silent tears while her own children planned to steal her father's legacy. A woman who had spent her entire life caring for others while they plotted her financial ruin. But then I remembered the document in the shoebox. The sale of the building. The $5.9 million already secure in my new bank account. Far from their greedy hands. For the first time in months, I smiled. A small, sad smile, but a real one. Because I had just understood that the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, for the first time in my life, I had more ammunition than they did. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair in the living room, the same one where I had nursed Ethan, read him stories, and cried through every one of his heartbreaks, thinking about everything I had lost and everything I still had to gain. By the time the sun rose on the wedding day, I had made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like an enemy, then an enemy they would have. But an enemy with $6 million is far more dangerous than a broken, humiliated mother. The Monday after the wedding dawned with that fine, persistent rain that turns New York into a gray mirror. I hadn't gone back to the brownstone after the public humiliation. I checked into a small hotel near Penn Station, the Pennsylvanian, where rooms were $40 a night, and the faded floral wallpaper had seen better days. I needed time to process what had happened, to decide how to use the information I was carrying in my purse like a time bomb. At 9 in the morning, my cell phone rang. It was Chloe, my daughter, calling from San Francisco with that tense voice she used when something was worrying her. "Mom? What the hell happened at that wedding? I've gotten 3 texts from people who were there. They said Ethan screamed at you in front of everyone and that you left without saying goodbye." Chloe had always been more direct than her brother, more willing to stand up for what was right, but she was also more distant. Her life on the West Coast had removed her from the family drama in New York, and I had preferred to keep her out of the growing tensions with Ethan. "It was complicated," I murmured, looking out the hotel window at the wet rooftops. "Your brother has decided he doesn't need a mother anymore. Mom, please, just tell me, what exactly happened?" I told her everything. Every humiliating word of the toast, Jessica's coldness, the laughter of the guests who thought it was a joke. Chloe was silent for a long time after I finished. "That bastard," she finally whispered. "Mom, you have to get out of there. Come to San Francisco. My husband and I have plenty of room." It was a tempting offer, but I knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. Besides, there was something Chloe didn't know, something no one knew, that would completely change my position in this war that had just been officially declared. "No, Chloe. This time I'm not running." "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, I heard noises in the hotel hallway, familiar voices that made my stomach clench. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan and Jessica talking to the front desk clerk, showing him something on a phone, probably a picture of me. "I'll call you back," I whispered to Chloe, and hung up just as a knock came at my door. The knocks were insistent, demanding, as if they had a right to find me, to burst into my temporary refuge. "Mom, open the door." "We know you're in there," Ethan shouted with that voice I knew from his teenage years, that mix of authority and emotional blackmail he had perfected over the years. "Teresa," Jessica added with false sweetness, "we just want to talk. Things got a little out of hand yesterday." A little out of hand? My public shaming had been planned, calculated, and executed with surgical precision, but they called it a little out of hand. I opened the door, leaving the security chain on. Through the crack, I could see their faces. He looked nervous and sweaty. She was perfectly made up despite it being 9 in the morning on a rainy Monday. "What do you want?" I asked with a calm I didn't feel. "Look, Mom," Ethan began, running a hand through his hair like he always did when he was lying. "I think there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I'd been drinking. Jessica was nervous about the wedding. You know how these things are." "No." I replied firmly. I don't know how these things are. Explain it to me. Jessica stepped forward, positioning herself in front of my son with that rehearsed smile she saved for difficult occasions. What Ethan means is that yesterday was a very stressful day for everyone. Weddings can bring out the worst in people. But we're family, aren't we? Families forgive each other. Families forgive each other, I repeated, savoring each word as if it were vinegar. After you scream that I don't even deserve a roof over my head? After you humiliate me in front of 200 people? Mom, please, Ethan pleaded, and for a second, I saw the 8-year-old boy who used to cry when he got hurt at the park. You know I didn't mean it. I was upset. Upset about what? About having to publicly acknowledge the woman who raised you? About having to pretend in front of your rich friends that you have a working-class mother? His mask slipped for an instant. I saw the flash of irritation in his eyes, the hardness that had been growing since Jessica came into his life. Look, Mom, he said, his voice colder. I think you're overreacting. It was an unfortunate comment, that's all. But you have to understand our position. Jessica and I are building a life together, and there are certain social expectations. Social expectations that include disowning your mother. Not disowning. Just maintaining a certain distance. It's normal for couples our age. Jessica nodded eagerly, as if Ethan had just spoken a great truth. Exactly, Teresa. Children grow up, they start their own families. It's the natural cycle of life. And does the natural cycle include plotting to steal my father's inheritance? The silence was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Ethan went pale as if he'd just seen a ghost. And for the first time, Jessica lost her perfect composure. What? What are you talking about? My son stammered. The properties in Soho, the ones your brand new wife researched through her father, the ones you were planning to manage for my own good after the honeymoon. Jessica recovered quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the alarm in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, Teresa. I think you're confused. Confused? I heard you talking on the terrace last night. Every word, every plan, every lie. Ethan looked at me as if he were truly seeing me for the first time, as if he'd just realized that his quiet, submissive mother had ears, a memory, and apparently more information than he had bargained for. Mom, if you heard something out of context— Out of context, I finally exploded, unlatching the chain so I could face them directly. Is planning to steal my father's assets out of context? It's not stealing, Jessica muttered, her voice trembling slightly. It's responsible wealth management. A woman your age can't handle those kinds of investments alone. A woman my age? You mean the woman who has maintained a 5-story building for 40 years? The one who has managed tenants, repairs, taxes, and bills without anyone's help? That's different, Ethan insisted, regaining some of his usual arrogance. Commercial properties in Soho are a different league. They require specific knowledge, contacts in the real estate industry. Contacts like your father-in-law, I suppose. Jessica's expression hardened. She was no longer pretending to be the sweet, concerned daughter-in-law. Look, Teresa, my father is a respected businessman with decades of experience in the industry. If we were discussing optimizing your properties, it would be for your own benefit. My own benefit? Just like this conversation is for my own benefit? Ethan sighed with exasperation, as if I were a petulant child refusing to understand the obvious. Mom, you have to be realistic. You're not going to live forever. Those properties will eventually be ours, mine and Chloe's. Wouldn't it be better if we started managing them now, while you can still oversee the process? Oversee while you have the real control? That's one way of looking at it. In that moment, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was like the final thread snapping in a fabric that was already unraveling. Silent, but final. Out, I said, with a calm that surprised even myself. What? Get out. Both of you. Now. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm very serious. And don't come looking for me again. When I want to speak with you, I'll call you. You can't do this, Jessica shrieked, finally losing her composure completely. We're your family. My family, I repeated slowly. Doesn't scream at me in public that I don't deserve a roof. My family doesn't plot to steal my father's inheritance. My family doesn't turn me into a servant in my own home. Ethan took a step toward me, wearing that authoritative expression I'd seen 1,000 times when he wanted something. "Mom, you're being irrational. Come home and we'll talk like adults." "Home? To what home? The one you said I don't deserve?" For the first time since the conversation began, I saw something resembling regret in his eyes. But it was too little, too late, too fake. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my sight," I said, and gently closed the door. I heard them whispering furiously in the hallway for several minutes before their footsteps faded down the carpeted corridor of the hotel. When silence returned to the room, I sat on the single bed with its faded floral bedspread and dialed the number for my bank manager. It was time they learned exactly who they were dealing with. That afternoon, I made the first real decision of my adult life. Not for my children, not for my absent husband, not for anyone's expectations but my own. I walked out of the hotel with my worn leather purse on my arm and walked through the New York drizzle to the Citibank offices on Broadway, where my bank manager, David Miller, was waiting for me with a look of poorly concealed curiosity. David was an efficient, discreet man in his 40s who had handled my accounts for the past 5 years without ever questioning my financial decisions. When I had explained over the phone that I needed to completely reorganize my assets, he simply scheduled me for a 4 o'clock appointment. "Mrs. Morales," he greeted me, standing up from his glass desk. "Please have a seat. As you requested, I've prepared a summary of your current financial situation." He sat across from me with a navy blue folder that contained more paperwork than I had ever seen in my life. Over the next hour, David explained something that forever changed my perception of myself. I was, officially, a millionaire. "Let's see," he began, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the documents. "The $5,900,000 from the sale of the Upper East Side brownstone is secure in the new account. The 2 commercial properties in Soho you inherited from your father currently generate $4,200 a month and have an estimated market value between $2.8 and $3.2 million. Your conservative investment portfolio adds another $180,000, and you have approximately $45,000 in checking accounts." He paused to let me process the numbers. "In total, Mrs. Morales, your net worth is approximately $9.2 million. You are a woman with more than sufficient resources to make any decision you see fit. $9,200,000. I repeated the figure in my mind like a prayer, a mantra that restored the dignity I had lost, drop by drop, over years of humiliation. I thought of all the times I had counted pennies at the supermarket, the nights I'd eaten only yogurt so Ethan wouldn't go without, the vacations I had never allowed myself while I paid for his. "David," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, firmer and more decisive than it had ever sounded, "I want to make some immediate changes." "Of course. Tell me what you need." I took a piece of paper from my purse where I had jotted down everything I wanted to do during the subway ride from Penn Station. My handwriting was a little shaky, but the ideas were crystal clear. First, I want to change all my account numbers. New passwords, new security questions. No one but me should have any information about my finances. David nodded, taking notes on his tablet. Second, I want to buy a condo. Something nice, in a quiet neighborhood, but just for me. In my name only. Do you have a preferred area? A budget in mind? The Upper West Side, maybe, or Brooklyn Heights. Something between $400,000 and $500,000, with lots of natural light and a small terrace where I can have plants. It was the first time in my life I had talked about buying something thinking only of what I wanted. Not what was practical for the family, not what was on sale, not what we could afford, just what would make me happy. Perfect. I have contacts at several trusted real estate agencies. Anything else? Yes, I continued, surprising myself with my own resolve. I want to establish a trust fund for my grandson, Matthew, something his parents can't touch until he turns 25. $500,000. David raised his eyebrows, impressed. That's a very generous decision. Would you like the parents to be informed of the fund's existence? No, not for now. I want it to be a surprise for when Matthew is old enough to understand that his grandmother was thinking of him. It was my way of protecting the one family member who had shown me unconditional love. Matthew wasn't to blame for having greedy, manipulative parents. "And the properties in Soho?" David asked. "Any changes to their management?" "Yes. I want to switch management companies immediately. And I want a formal notice sent to the tenants informing them of the change. Let them know that I am now directly managing my properties." It was a message for Jessica and her father, a signal that their plans for optimization were dead on arrival. "Understood. Is there anything else you need today?" "One last thing," I said, feeling as if I were leaping off a cliff into unknown waters. "I want to hire a lawyer, someone specializing in family law and inheritance. May I ask why?" "To ensure my assets are legally protected, and to draft a very specific will regarding what happens to my estate when I'm gone." David looked at me with something that resembled respect. I think it was the first time anyone had looked at me that way in years. When I left the bank, it was 6:30 in the evening. New York had transformed while I was inside. The shop lights created golden puddles on the wet sidewalks. People hurried under black umbrellas like little islands of survival. And the smell of roasted nuts from a street cart reminded me of winters from my childhood. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to rush home to make dinner for anyone. I didn't have to wash someone else's dishes, or do laundry that wasn't mine, or listen to complaints about the volume of my TV. I didn't have to go grocery shopping with others' tastes in mind, or count every last penny to make it to the end of the month. I walked to Macy's on Herald Square. I hadn't set foot in those elegant aisles in years. I'd always bought my clothes at Target or on clearance racks. But that afternoon, I went straight to the women's department and browsed the racks like a tourist in my own country. I tried on a royal blue dress that cost more than my old monthly grocery bill. It fit perfectly. I also bought comfortable yet elegant shoes, a wool coat that made me look 10 years younger, and a face cream I had only ever gazed at with envy at the beauty counters. The sales associate, a young woman with a friendly smile, treated me with the professional courtesy reserved for customers who pay without hesitation. "Will that be all?" she asked as she wrapped my purchases in tissue paper. "Yes," I replied, swiping my new debit card without looking at the total. "That's everything." When I left the store with my bags, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I was the same Teresa who had cried in the cheap hotel that morning, but something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in 64 years, I had made decisions based solely on my own well-being. I decided to have dinner alone at a nice restaurant in the West Village. I sat at a table by the window, ordered grilled salmon and a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, and watched the city life go by as I savored my meal without rushing, without having to get up to serve anyone, without having to listen to critiques about the salt or disparaging remarks about my cooking. The waiter, an older gentleman with an impeccable tie, treated me with the deference any customer dining alone on a Tuesday night in one of the city's fine establishments deserves. "Would you care for some dessert, ma'am?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Cheesecake with berries and a black coffee." While waiting for dessert, I took out my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Ethan and 2 texts from Jessica. I deleted them without reading. For the first time in my life as a mother, my son's needs were not my priority. That night, I slept in a 4-star hotel in Soho. The room had a huge bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a marble bathroom with a separate tub, and a beautiful view of the street below. I took a long bath with aromatic salts provided by the hotel, put on the new silk pajamas I'd bought, real silk, not polyester, and slipped into bed with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about what I had to do for others the next day. I simply existed, in silence, in a room that was mine alone, in a bed where no one would ask me to get them a glass of water or turn down the volume on something that bothered them. I slept for 8 straight hours for the first time in months. No nightmares, no jolting awake, no waking every hour wondering if I'd done something wrong or what new humiliation tomorrow would bring. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the white linen curtains. I stayed in bed for an extra 10 minutes, just enjoying the freedom of not having a schedule imposed by others. It was Wednesday, the first day of my new life, and it had started exactly as I wanted it to. Quiet, peaceful, and completely my own. On Friday morning, I got the call I had been expecting. It was Chloe, her voice tight with the tension she had inherited from me. Mom, you have to come over. Ethan is throwing a massive fit. He says you've lost your mind, that you've disappeared with money that isn't yours, and that he's going to take legal action if you don't show up today. I laughed for the first time in weeks. A dry but genuine laugh. Legal action? Over what money that isn't mine? I don't know, Mom, but he's called the whole family, even the relatives in Florida. He's organized some kind of family tribunal at the brownstone. He's calling it an intervention, as if I were an alcoholic or a gambling addict who had lost her senses, as if taking care of my own money and making my own decisions were a mental illness. And what do you think, Chloe? There was a long pause. I knew my daughter. She was choosing her words carefully. I think Ethan is scared because for the first time in his life he can't control you, but I also think you should go. To set the record straight, once and for all. She was right. It was time to end this. Tell him I'll be there at 6 p.m. And Chloe, bring witnesses. People who aren't on your brother's payroll. At 5:30, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel suite. I was wearing my new blue dress, the elegant shoes, the wool coat that made me look like a respectable woman instead of a grateful servant. I had my hair styled at a chic Soho salon that morning. Not Mrs. Carmen's, but one of those modern places where they treat you like you're important just for paying the bill. I looked good, better than I had in years. I arrived at the Upper East Side brownstone at 6 o'clock sharp. The street was lined with familiar cars. Ethan's BMW, Richard Davenport's Mercedes, the SUV belonging to my brother-in-law's family from Florida. Chloe was waiting for me at the entrance, nervous but resolute. Mom, before you go up, I want you to know something. They've been in there for hours. Ethan hired a lawyer. A lawyer? For what? To have you declared legally incompetent. He says a woman your age making erratic financial decisions needs a legal guardian. The air was knocked out of my lungs. A legal guardian. As if I were a child or mentally ill. As if 64 years of responsible living and 30 years of successful property management meant nothing. And what does the lawyer say? That it's very hard to prove unless they have evidence of dementia or cognitive decline. But Ethan is willing to try. We rode the elevator up in silence. When the doors opened to the penthouse, I was met with a scene straight out of a mob movie. My entire extended family sitting around the dining table that had been mine for years, with Ethan presiding like the patriarch of a clan about to pass judgment on a traitor. They were all there. Jessica with her icy smile, Richard Davenport in his prosperous developer's suit, my in-laws who had flown in from Florida specifically for this, and even a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years but who was suddenly very concerned about my mental well-being. And at the head of the table, with a wolfish grin, was a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a maroon tie whom I assumed was the lawyer hired to certify my insanity. "Mom," Ethan said, standing up dramatically. "Please sit down. We need to talk." "I'd rather stand," I replied with a calm that astonished me. "This won't take long." Jessica exchanged a meaningful glance with her father. The lawyer scribbled in a leather-bound notebook. "Teresa," Richard Davenport began in the booming voice of a man used to his words being commands, "we're worried about you. Ethan told us you've made some rash decisions in the last few days." "Rash?" "Changing all your bank accounts without consulting the family. Disappearing for days, spending money compulsively," the lawyer listed off, reading from his notes. "These are behaviors that suggest a certain emotional imbalance." I laughed. A clear, loud laugh that echoed through the penthouse. Emotional imbalance? For managing my own money? "It's not just that, Mom." Ethan intervened with a concerned son voice, playing his part perfectly. "You sold the building without telling anyone. This was our family home. It was my building. It is in my name. And I sold it because it is mine. But without considering the tax implications, without considering the family living here." The lawyer continued. "What family?" I finally exploded, letting out all my pent-up rage. The family that screamed at me that I don't deserve a roof over my head? The family that has used my home as a free hotel for 2 years? The family that plotted to steal my father's inheritance? The silence was deafening. The relatives from Florida looked at each other uncomfortably. They had clearly been left in the dark about the plans of Jessica and her father. No one planned to steal anything from you, Jessica muttered, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. No? Then explain this conversation. I took a small device out of my purse that I had bought that morning at an electronics store. I pressed play, and Jessica's voice filled the room. According to the records, your grandfather owned 2 commercial properties in a building in Soho. Your mother has been collecting that rent for years without really knowing what it was. The faces around the table changed as if they were watching a horror movie. Chloe's eyes went wide. The in-laws frowned. Richard Davenport visibly paled. The recording continued. After the wedding, it might be a good idea for your mother to get some professional financial advice. My dad knows people who can help her. Optimize those assets. And finally, my son's voice. You're right. After the honeymoon, we'll talk to her. It's for her own good. When the recording finished, the silence was thick enough to chew. This is out of context, Ethan stammered. Out of context? Planning to manage my properties behind my back is out of context? The lawyer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Morales, while this conversation is unfortunate, it doesn't change the fact that your recent decisions have been erratic. Erratic? Let's see what you think is erratic. I pulled out the navy blue folder that David Miller had prepared for me that morning. Total assets. 9.2 million. ALLLEGALE, ALLDECLARED, ALLMAN, AGEDBYQU, ALIFIEDPROFESSIONALSE, ILETTHEPAPERSDROPONTOTHETEBLECARDSFROMADECK. $9.2 million. All legal, all declared, all managed by qualified professionals. Let the papers Draponto Theatable like Cardis from a deck. $500,000 in a trust fund for my grandson, Matthew. A new condo purchased outright. Diversified investments and professional financial advisory. Richard Davenport picked up the papers with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the figures rapidly. This can't be right. Call Citibank if you want. David Miller will be happy to confirm it. Ethan's expression had shifted from fake paternal concern to something much rawer. Pure, unadulterated greed mixed with panic. Mom, if you have this much money, why didn't you tell us? We could have managed it together, as a family. As a family? After you screamed at me that I don't even deserve a roof over my head? I walked to the table and gathered my papers with deliberately slow movements. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, my voice leaving no room for argument. You have exactly 30 days to vacate this penthouse. The new owners of the building want to begin a full renovation. You can't do this, Jessica screamed, jumping up from her chair. We have rights. What rights? The right to live rent-free in the home of the woman you despise? The right to plot to steal my inheritance? I turned toward the door, but before I left, I looked back one last time at my son, Ethan. I have loved you for 32 years. I have given you everything I had and everything I was. But I will no longer buy your love with my dignity. Mom, please, he murmured. And for a second, I saw the little boy who used to cling to my legs when he had nightmares. No, I said, with a firmness that came from a place deep inside me. It's over. When you learn to respect me, you'll know where to find me. Until then, we have nothing more to say. Chloe followed me to the elevator. When the doors closed, she hugged me. I'm proud of you, Mom. It was about time someone stood up to them. As we descended, I heard muffled shouts from the penthouse. Voices arguing, blaming each other, despairing at the reality that their golden goose had learned to fly. I walked out of the brownstone on the Upper East Side for the last time as its owner, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. 3 weeks after the family confrontation, I moved into my new apartment on the Upper West Side. It was a second-floor unit with a balcony overlooking Amsterdam Avenue, near a Trader Joe's, in one of those classic pre-war buildings with high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked softly when you walked barefoot in the morning. It had 2 bedrooms, a huge living room with south-facing bay windows, and a small but bright kitchen where I could cook my meals without hearing complaints about the smell of onions. The first morning, I woke up without an alarm simply because my body had decided it had slept enough. It was 9:15, a time that would have been unthinkable in my previous life, when I got up at 6 to have breakfast ready before Ethan grumbled his way down from the penthouse. I stayed in bed for an extra 10 minutes, just because I could, listening to the neighborhood wake up. The sanitation truck collecting the trash, the metallic rattle of shop gates being rolled up, the voices of neighbors greeting each other on their way to work. I got up, put on the silk robe I'd bought at Bloomingdale's, my first personal luxury in decades, and made coffee in my new pod machine. Nespresso. Not the instant coffee from the discount store that I had gotten used to during years of forced frugality. I sat on the balcony with my steaming mug and watched the life on Amsterdam Avenue as if it were a private show staged for my entertainment. An elderly woman walked her white poodle, stopping every few feet for the dog to sniff the trees. A group of tourists consulted a paper map, arguing in a foreign language about the direction of the Natural History Museum. A man on a bicycle had fresh flowers in his front basket, probably on his way to his neighborhood flower shop. Normal life. A life that continued its course without anyone depending on me to make it work. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had dreamed of since I was 40. I signed up for a painting class at the 92nd Street Y. The teacher was a woman my age, Laura, who had discovered her passion for art after retiring from her job at an insurance company. "Have you painted before?" she asked as she helped me set up my easel. "I liked to draw as a little girl," I replied, feeling an odd shyness. "But it's been over 40 years since I've held a brush." "Perfect. Then we're going to reawaken that part of you that fell asleep." The first day, I painted an amorphous blob that was supposed to be an apple. The second day, the apple actually looked like an apple, albeit a slightly drunk one. By the third week, I had completed my first still life, 3 oranges and a bottle of olive oil on a blue cloth. "Not bad at all for someone who says she can't paint," Laura commented, observing my work. "Do you really think so?" "I do. You have an intuition for color. And something more important, you have patience. Painting takes time, and you're not in a hurry to get anywhere." She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't in a hurry. I didn't have to rush home to make dinner. I didn't have to schedule my days around others' needs. I didn't have to measure every minute of my free time as if it were liquid gold. During those weeks, Chloe visited me 3 times. She would fly in from San Francisco for the weekend, and we would sit in my new kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about things we hadn't discussed in years. About her childhood memories, her career plans, her relationship with her husband, about everything except Ethan. "Mom," she said during her 3rd visit, "you look better than you have in the last 10 years. It was true. I had let my hair grow out. I no longer got it cut every 6 weeks at the cheapest salon in Queens, but went to a stylist in Soho who had suggested a cut that framed my face and made me look younger. I had gained a little weight, but in a healthy way, because now I cooked meals I actually enjoyed instead of settling for whatever was left after serving others. I feel better," I confessed to her. "It's strange, but I feel like I've been holding my breath for 30 years, and I've finally been able to exhale." One afternoon in November, while strolling through Central Park after my painting class, I saw Matthew playing near the carousel with a nanny I didn't recognize. My grandson was 8 now. He had grown since the wedding, and when he saw me, he ran toward me with a smile that reminded me of Ethan at his age. "Grandma Teresa, where have you been? Dad said you were sick." The nanny, a young woman in her 20s, looked at me with curiosity but no hostility. "I'm not sick, sweetie," I said, hugging him. "I'm just living in a new house. Why don't you come visit us? I miss your mac and cheese." My heart skipped a beat. It was the first time anyone in the family had said they missed me, that they valued something I brought to their lives. "You know what, Matthew? I'm going to give you my new phone number. Whenever you want to make mac and cheese together, you call me and come to my house." I wrote my number on a napkin from a park kiosk, and he tucked it into his jacket pocket as if it were a treasure. "Do Mom and Dad know I saw you?" "They don't have to know for now. It can be our secret." The nanny approached discreetly. "Excuse me, ma'am, but we have to go. Mr. and Mrs. Morales said he needs to be home before 6. Mr. and Mrs. Morales. They didn't even use my son's first name anymore. "Of course," I said, and knelt to say goodbye to Matthew. Remember? When you want mac and cheese, you call me. That night, for the first time since the confrontation, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness or self-pity. They were tears of relief, of release, of mourning for the woman I had been, and celebrating the woman I was becoming. December arrived with that crisp, dry New York cold that makes the air feel like glass. One Saturday morning, as I was having coffee on my balcony wrapped in my new blanket, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard the unmistakable voice of my grandson. "Grandma, can I come over and make mac and cheese with you today?" "Of course, sweetie. How will you get here?" "My nanny, Patricia, can bring me. She says she knows your street." 2 hours later, Matthew was in my kitchen wearing an apron that was way too big for him, helping me make the cheese sauce while telling me about school, his friends, and his plans for Christmas. "Does Dad know you're here?" I asked as he whisked the milk with scientific concentration. "No. I told Patricia we were going to the park, but that's not a lie, right? After we eat, we can go to the park." He was a smart kid. He had inherited that ability to find creative solutions to complicated problems. While the macaroni was baking, Matthew explored my apartment with the natural curiosity of a child. He stopped in front of my paintings. I had 5 finished and framed by now. "Did you paint this, Grandma?" "Yes. Do you like it?" "It's really pretty. Mom says you don't know how to do anything special, but this is special." Jessica's words, filtered through the innocence of a child, stung but didn't surprise me. It was exactly the kind of poison she would spread on anything that belonged to me or brought me joy. "You know what, Matthew? Everyone knows how to do special things. We just need the time and space to discover what they are." As we ate the warm mac and cheese, my grandson told me that his parents had been fighting a lot lately, mostly about money, and that Dad had to find a new job because Grandma's money ran out. It hadn't run out, of course. It had simply stopped being available to them. "Are you mad at Dad?" he asked with the direct curiosity of a child. "I'm not mad, sweetie. I'm sad about some things that happened, but I'm never mad at you. Dad says that when you're older, you're going to come live with us again." "No, Matthew. Grown-ups don't go backward. We move forward, toward new things." When Patricia came to pick him up, Matthew hugged me tightly. "Can I come again another day?" "Any day you want." That night, I sat in my new armchair, a brown leather reading chair I had chosen solely for my own comfort, with a Virginia Woolf novel I'd bought at the Strand. It was the first time in decades I had read for pleasure, without interruptions, without feeling guilty for not doing something useful for others. As the pages turned, I realized something fundamental. I had regained not only my financial and emotional independence, but something far more valuable. I had regained my identity. I was no longer just Ethan's mother, or Jessica's mother-in-law, or Matthew's grandmother. I was Teresa Morales, a novice painter, a voracious reader, a 64-year-old woman who had learned that it's never too late to start living for yourself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough, more than enough. It was perfect. 6 months later, on a May afternoon that smelled of jasmine and the promise of summer, I received a call I had been expecting since the day of the family confrontation. It was Ethan. "Mom," his voice said on the other end of the line, smaller and more vulnerable than I had heard it in years. "Can we talk?" I was silent for a few seconds, looking out my kitchen window toward the street, where the neighborhood's elderly ladies were picking out tomatoes and arguing over the price of fish with the familiarity of those who have turned daily shopping into a social ritual. "Of course," I finally replied. "Where would you like to meet? Can I come up to your place?" It was the first time he had acknowledged that I had a place of my own, a space that belonged to me, which he needed permission to enter. An hour later, Ethan was sitting in my living room, looking uncomfortable on the new sofa I had chosen for my back support, not to impress anyone. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt and faded jeans, a far cry from the polished executive he had been for the last few years. His eyes had deep, dark circles, and he had lost a noticeable amount of weight. "The apartment is really nice," he murmured, looking around with a mix of curiosity and melancholy. "It's very... you. Thank you." We sat in silence for several minutes. I wasn't going to make it easy for him. If he wanted to talk, he would have to find the words himself. Mom, he finally began, his voice cracking. I screwed up. Big time. In what way? In every way. He ran his hands over his face, a gesture I remembered from when he was a teenager and had done something he was ashamed of. Jessica left me. I wasn't surprised. I had sensed that a woman like her wouldn't stick with a man without resources, especially after discovering the golden goose had flown the coop. When, 3 weeks ago, she took Matthew and went to her parents' house. She said she can't be with a failure who can't even provide for his own family. Tears started to roll down his cheeks. It was the first time I had seen him cry since he was 12 and had broken his arm falling off his bike. I lost my job too, he continued. The consulting firm closed its New York office, and without the rental income from the penthouse, I can't pay the mortgage on the house we bought in the Hamptons. What mortgage? The one we took out last year. Jessica wanted a bigger, more modern house. We put the penthouse up as collateral, but since it's not ours anymore, his voice broke completely. I'm going to lose everything, Mom. The house, my son, my entire life. I got up and went to the kitchen to make tea. I needed a few minutes to process what I had just heard and decide how to respond. When I returned with the tray, Ethan had calmed down a bit, but he still had the lost look of a castaway watching the last lifeboat sail away. Did you come here to ask me for money? I asked directly. No, he answered immediately, and for the first time in months I heard sincerity in his voice. I came to ask for your forgiveness. I sat across from him, pouring tea into the porcelain cups I had bought at a small antique shop in Soho. They were beautiful, delicate, completely unnecessary, but they made me happy every time I used them. Forgiveness for what exactly? For everything. His hands trembled slightly as he took the cup. For treating you like a servant. For letting Jessica humiliate you in your own home. For the wedding toast. For trying to steal Grandpa's inheritance. For trying to have you declared incompetent. He paused for a long time. For forgetting that you're my mother, and that everything I am, I owe to you. The words I had waited years to hear had finally arrived. But strangely, I no longer needed them with the same desperation as before. Why now, Ethan? Why after you've lost everything? Because when you lose everything, you realize what truly matters. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. During these months without you, without your support, without your unconditional love, I realized I had traded the most important person in my life for things that were worthless. And Matthew? Jessica won't let me see him. She says until I have a stable job and can offer a suitable environment, I'm not a fit father. His tears started flowing again. I'm 32 years old, Mom, and I feel like a lost little boy. I don't know how to fix my life. I don't even know where to begin. I handed him a paper napkin. It was soft, good quality. Another small luxury I allowed myself because I could, and because it made me feel like I deserved nice things. Have you learned anything from all this? I asked. I've learned that money can't buy everything. I've learned that people who love you for your bank account will leave you when it's empty. I've learned that humiliating your mother in front of 200 people doesn't make you a successful man. It makes you a miserable one. His voice hardened with self-loathing. I've learned that I was an arrogant fool who thought he was better than the woman who gave him life. And what are you going to do now? I don't know. I'm living in a shared apartment with 2 other guys in Jamaica, Queens. I'm working as a waiter at a bar near Columbia University. I make about $1,500 a month. He laughed bitterly. Less than what Jessica used to spend on a purse. And you think that's not much? I don't think honest work is beneath me. I think it's pathetic that it took me 32 years to learn that. We sat in silence for a long time. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, creating golden patterns on the hardwood floor. In the distance, the normal sounds of a living neighborhood could be heard. Children playing in a square, the hum of traffic, the clinking of spoons on the terraces of cafes. Ethan, I said finally, do you know when I decided I had to change my life? When? When I realized I had spent 64 years waiting for other people to give me value, waiting for your father to value me enough to stay, waiting for you to value me enough to defend me, waiting for Jessica to value me enough to treat me with respect. I took a sip of tea, savoring the moment, and I understood that if I didn't value myself, no one else was going to do it for me. You're right. For years, I told myself I was a good mother because I sacrificed for you, that I was a good woman because I put others' needs before my own. But do you know what I really was? What? A woman who was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of not being needed. Afraid of finding out who I was when no one depended on me. I set my cup down on the table. And when I was finally left alone, I discovered something wonderful. That I liked my own company. That I had my own interests. My own dreams. A personality that had been hidden for decades. Ethan looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was very young. Genuine admiration. How did you do it? How did you find the strength? I stopped waiting for others to give me permission to be happy. I stopped trying to buy love with sacrifices. I stopped believing that my worth depended on how useful I was to others. I stood up and walked to the desk where I kept my finished paintings. I took out the most recent one, a self-portrait I had painted the week before. It had taken me 3 months to complete, looking at myself in the mirror until I found in my face not only the wrinkles and gray hairs, but also the quiet strength I had developed during these months of chosen solitude. This is me now, I said, showing him the painting. A woman who knows who she is, who doesn't apologize for taking up space in the world, who doesn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. Ethan studied the self-portrait for a long time. You look different. In the painting and in real life, I'm free. And is there room in that freedom for a son who's been a complete idiot but wants to learn how to be better? The question I had been waiting for. The one I knew would come, but which I needed to hear asked with real humility, not the emotional manipulation that had characterized our conversations for years. Ethan, I said, with all the sincerity I was capable of, I will always love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But I am not going back to being the mother I was before. What do you mean? I mean, I am not going to solve your financial problems. I will not be your emotional safety net. I will not sacrifice my happiness to guarantee yours. I paused. But if you want to build a new relationship, one based on mutual respect and genuine love, I'm willing to try. I want that, he said immediately. More than anything in the world. Then start by fixing your relationship with yourself. Find a job that allows you to support yourself with dignity. Fight to see your son. Become the man you want to be, not the one others expect you to be. And in the meantime, you can come for dinner on Sundays. You can call me when you need to talk to someone who loves you. You can be my son, but not my personal project. That night, after Ethan left, I sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine, a Cabernet I had chosen just because I liked the taste, and reflected on our conversation. It had taken me 64 years to learn something fundamental. That loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. That being a good mother doesn't require being a martyr. That boundless generosity is a form of emotional cowardice. But I had also learned something beautiful. That it's never too late to start over. That freedom has no expiration date. That a woman can reinvent herself at 64 with the same courage as a 20-year-old. From my balcony, I could see the lights of New York City stretching to the horizon like a golden sea of possibilities. My city, my life, my future, all waiting for me with the infinite patience of someone who knows that the best stories sometimes begin in the final chapter. Have you ever been in a similar situation? Do you know someone who has had to choose between their own dignity and their family's love? Tell me about it in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Maybe it will reach someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to value yourself.